Do you know what a man's greatest weakness is? It is not a lack of courage, nor an inability to love, nor the fear of giving up. A man's greatest weakness lies in the fact that he gives almost everything, but never enough. It is the restraint in his gestures, the measured affection, the sporadic presence, a subtle yet destructive pattern. He gives you crumbs and expects you to enjoy them as if they were a feast. And the most dangerous part is this: over time, you begin to believe that this is exactly what you deserve. But the game changes the moment you decide to give back in the same way, not with anger or revenge, but in equal measure. Because what you accept, you teach, and what you give back shows who you are. Today I want to guide you through this quiet yet powerful process to stop accepting crumbs and begin to take the place of those who have already recognized their worth. In the end, you may realize that true strength was never in him. It was always in you, just waiting to finally wake up. Number 1. The power to recognize when you are settling for less than you deserve. This moment never comes without warning. It shows up as a persistent feeling deep in your chest, as if something in you knows that you are living below your potential. It is a quiet intuition that begins in small details but grows stronger until it becomes impossible to ignore. It is not a scream, not a tragedy, it is simply an absence of depth, of real presence, of truth. Do you notice when he only responds when he feels like it? When he makes plans at the last minute? When he speaks kindly but does not act consistently? When he is with you but never fully? You pretend not to see it, or convince yourself that maybe it is normal, that having a little is better than having nothing. That is exactly where everything starts to go wrong. It is not easy to recognize when you are accepting too little. This little often disguises itself as attention, affection, or promises. It appears in a good morning that comes in the afternoon, in empty conversations that only maintain control, in an "I miss you" that follows days of silence. And you, thirsty for proof that hope still exists, interpret these crumbs as signs of love. But in truth, they are only minimal gestures meant to keep you exactly where he wants you. But don't fool yourself. This does not happen because you are weak, needy, or naive. It happens because we humans tend to justify what we want to hold on to. You don't want to face reality because it hurts. To acknowledge that you are receiving too little often means admitting that you invested in someone who had nothing to offer. It means accepting that you built a castle on empty promises. And no one wants to look into that mirror. Yet there is a big difference between pain from love and self-denial born of need, between real difficulties and the acceptance of disrespect disguised as freedom. And this difference only becomes visible when you allow yourself to observe the patterns, yours and his. How many times have you cancelled plans just to be available for him? How many messages have you written and then deleted because you wanted him to make the first move? How many nights have you spent rehearsing sentences in your head out of fear of being too much? How often have you diminished yourself to fit into the tiny space he gave you? There is nothing more violent than forcing yourself into a space that was not made for you. Nothing more painful than realizing that you use your love like currency to buy crumbs of attention. And the cruelest part, often you do not even notice it. You convince yourself that you are patient, that he will change, that he just needs time. But deep inside you know you are only delaying the inevitable. He will not give you more because he never had to. The hard but liberating truth is this: people who do not keep their promises continue as long as it works. As long as you accept it, they will give the minimum. Because it is comfortable, because it works, because you are still there. And that is exactly where the awakening begins. When you stop looking at him and start looking at yourself. When you honestly ask yourself, what makes me accept so little? Why am I staying here waiting for crumbs when I know I deserve more? And most importantly, what do I really gain by staying in this dynamic? The answer usually lies in a lack disguised as hope, in the belief that love must be painful to be real, in the illusion that you have to win someone over to prove your worth, and all of it comes from the same place, a disconnection from your own identity. Someone who is connected to themselves does not settle for less. Someone who knows themselves respects themselves. Someone who respects themselves sets standards. And those who set standards drive away anyone who only has the minimum to offer. But that connection does not form overnight. It needs time, it needs silence, it needs courage, it needs patience. Above all, it requires looking inward, the same gaze you have directed at him for so long. Because as long as what he feels for you matters more than what you feel for yourself, nothing will change. You will remain trapped in this uneven dance, always hoping he will validate you, while the only validation that truly matters can only come from within. This is exactly the moment when many women wake up. Not because of a big fight or obvious infidelity, but because of an inner exhaustion. A spiritual fatigue that screams, that's enough. Enough waiting, enough excusing, enough accepting. And the remarkable thing is, you don't have to create a scandal. You don't have to confront him. You don't have to prove anything. It is enough to stop. Just stop responding. Say no once, clearly and firmly. Be unavailable. Stop settling. This simple step, stopping the acceptance of crumbs, is one of the strongest forms of self-love. It does not arise from pride, but from clarity. From the clarity that you were not born to be remembered only occasionally, to be second choice or almost enough. You were born to be fully chosen, to be a priority. And that only happens when you treat yourself that way. There is no magic in this process. There is decision, consistency, and rebuilding. Piece by piece, you begin to nourish yourself from other sources, from real friendships, from your time with yourself, from personal projects, from everything you once gave up to please someone who never truly saw you. And along the way, something even deeper happens. You regain your perspective. The gaze that once got lost in his signals now turns inward. And it is precisely this perspective that filters out everything that no longer aligns with your worth. From this point on, you no longer tolerate the small things, not because you have become hard or bitter, but because you finally recognize your own value. And someone who knows their worth understands. Being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who has no use for your presence. And then something almost magical happens. When you raise your inner standards, life responds. People begin to see you differently. You attract new kinds of relationships. You position yourself more clearly. You are no longer afraid to say what you feel. And above all, you are no longer in a hurry. Because someone who knows their worth does not chase after anyone who gives too little. And someone who can wait does not settle for crumbs. This strength, the ability to recognize when you are accepting too little, is the turning point. It marks the beginning of a new stage, a stage in which you no longer have to ask, prove, or beg, a stage in which you simply become, and what you create in that process can never be taken from you. Perhaps you are standing at that point right now, tired, confused, full of doubt. You wonder whether you are exaggerating, whether it is still worth it, whether you should give him another chance. But the answer does not lie with me. It lies within you, in what you feel when you finally stop lying to yourself, in what you sense when, despite all your effort, you receive nothing in return and still keep trying. That feeling is your boundary knocking at the door. You can ignore it for a while longer, but it will stay until you open, until you change, until you choose yourself. Because in the end, accepting too little does not make you strong. It makes you inattentive. And no one thrives on dry ground. So pause, look, feel, recognize, because in the moment you see, everything changes. And your whole life begins to be written in different words. Words you choose yourself. Words that nourish you. Words that finally make sense. Number 2, why does he only give you crumbs? And what does that say about him? Not about you. It is very common to believe that what we receive from others reflects our own worth. If he distances himself, you might think, I am too intense. If he does not write, you think, I am not interesting enough. If he does not want to commit, you think, I am not enough. This distorted logic creeps in slowly, and the most dangerous part is that it sounds plausible at first, until you begin to really look. When a man gives you only crumbs, your first impulse is to ask yourself, what is wrong with me? But that is the wrong question. The right one is, what does this behavior say about him? Because when someone gives so little, that is not a measure of your worth, but a clear reflection of his own emotional limits. The problem is not that you expect too much. The problem is that he is willing to give so little. There are men who never learned to love maturely, men who grew up believing that showing affection is a weakness. They get involved, but only to the point where they feel they still have control. They enjoy being desired, but they fear a woman who knows exactly what she wants. These are men who cannot stay because they never learned how to stay. And when they sense that someone meets them with depth, they try to keep control by giving the absolute minimum, just enough so you do not leave. But that is not love. It is fear disguised as freedom. Control dressed as charm. A cycle. He gives the minimum, you respond by giving more, and he feeds on your devotion. It is a game. And the cruel thing is, you often do not even realize you are playing. A man who gives only crumbs is not protecting himself, he is testing you. He observes how far you will go. He sees your weaknesses. He notices that you are still there after 3 days without a reply, that you come back after a week of silence, and that knowledge means power to him. His behavior is not random. He knows exactly when he disappears. He knows how much it frustrates you. He feels your restlessness, and he also senses how much courage you lack to walk away. And that is exactly what drives him. For men like him, the absence of consequences is equivalent to permission. That is why it is so crucial to understand, if you accept crumbs, he will not give you more. On the contrary, it only confirms to him that everything can stay as it is. As long as you are there, trying to make it work, explaining, sending messages, hoping for change, he is comfortable. Because the effort always comes from one side, and he knows that in the end you will stay. This is where many women lose themselves. They try to adjust their behavior to get more from him. They try to be nicer, more understanding, less demanding. They make an effort not to want too much, to give him space, as if the problem were their love and not his lack of emotional maturity. But you must understand, a man who gives only the minimum is usually emotionally unavailable, and you cannot change that. No matter how much effort, patience, or devotion you pour in, if he is not ready, you can be the most wonderful woman in the world, and you will still receive too little. Not because you are worthless, but because he lacks the depth to recognize what he has in his hands. It is as if you give him a jewel and he treats it like a stone. He does not know how to handle it, and because he does not know, he devalues it. But none of that has anything to do with you. It has to do with his immaturity, his wounds, his limited concept of closeness. Maybe he was rejected. Maybe he grew up in unstable relationships. Maybe he learned that feelings are dangerous. But none of that obligates you to stay. Your presence in someone's life should never be therapy. You are not responsible for healing a man's emotional wounds. You can empathize, but you must not sacrifice yourself to fix someone. Because in doing so, you lose yourself, while all you ever wanted was to be loved just as you are. The paradox is this: the man who gives you only crumbs often does not want to lose you, but he also does not know how to truly keep you. That is why he holds you in this gray zone, not close enough to commit, not distant enough to let you go. He wraps you in sweet words, sudden reappearances and small gestures. He knows exactly what to say and when to say it to keep you near. But he never goes all the way, because to move forward he would have to give up his comfort, and that is exactly what he avoids. He would rather keep you confused than face his own immaturity. He would rather feed your hope than admit he has nothing real to give. Because as long as you hope, he does not have to make a decision. And as long as he makes no decision, you stay and devalue yourself without realizing it. The only way to break this cycle is to clearly see what is truly happening. Stop focusing only on your feelings. Observe what he actually does. Because love is not what you feel for someone. Love is what that person does with your feelings. And if he gives you little, you do not need to deny your feelings, but you must question and redirect them. Maybe there is love, but it is not enough. Maybe there is a connection, but it is not healthy. Maybe the desire is strong, but not reciprocated. And all of that matters. All of it carries weight. All of it must be seen clearly. You must no longer romanticize the lack. You must stop interpreting his absence as respect for your space. You must stop seeing short replies as shyness. You must stop pretending you can live with less, because the more you justify it, the further you drift from yourself. What he gives you is not your responsibility, but what you accept, that is your responsibility. That is where your power lies. You cannot change what he offers, but you can decide whether you will continue to accept it, and that decision changes everything. The moment you stop trying to understand his reasons and begin to ask yourself, what am I actually doing with my own life? The balance begins to shift. You reclaim your place, you stop waiting, you begin to put yourself at the center. And believe me, when you change your stance, he feels it. He feels it. He feels it. But by then, it may already be too late, because a woman who has learned to treat herself with respect will never again accept disrespect. A woman who listens to her inner voice will no longer allow herself to be ignored. A woman who truly sees herself no longer begs for attention. She walks away, and her silence becomes deafening. You do not have to shout. You do not have to prove anything. Simply stop being available. Choose yourself, because that decision changes everything, even how he sees you. And if he changes, all the better. But let it not happen because you begged, explained, or waited. Let it happen because he realized he will lose you if he continues this way. And if he does not change, then you have changed, and that is the real victory. Because the only change you can truly control is the one within you, and that is, without a doubt, the most powerful of all. Number 3, giving back what he gives you, a mirror of his own lack. There comes a point when you feel neither anger nor the need to prove anything. The emotional exhaustion is so present that even the automatic responses fade away. And then a clarity emerges that does not shout, but carries weight. You stop. Just like that. You stop insisting, trying, justifying. Instead of repeatedly giving your presence to someone absent, you begin to give back in the same measure. Not as punishment, not as a game, but out of respect for yourself. Giving back what he gives you is a quiet but meaningful decision. It is like holding up a mirror to someone who has spent his entire life running from his own reflection. Until now, you were too understanding, too empathetic, too patient. But empathy without boundaries becomes submission. Patience without balance becomes self-abandonment. Eventually, only one response remains: absence. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any argument, and you begin to realize that it was always you who kept everything going. You carried the conversations, initiated the meetings, made peace, even when you were not at fault. You were the one who returned, who gave him space, who left the door slightly open. And from that, he learned that he could give little because you were always enough. But when you shift your focus, everything changes. When you stop giving affection without reciprocity, attention without response, presence without presence in return, he feels it. Because his comfort lived off your effort. When that effort stops, he is faced with something he cannot control: his own emptiness. The truth is, many men cannot bear to see themselves in the mirror. They are used to hiding in lukewarm relationships where no one challenges them to grow. Men like him live on emotional crumbs because they learn that it is enough, that they do not need to go deeper, that showing up occasionally is sufficient to remain desired. And as long as you feed that pattern, he does not need to change. But when you respond in the same measure, he begins to hear himself. And what he hears does not please him. He realizes that he cannot sustain real closeness, that he cannot handle true intensity, that he used charm as protection, games as distraction, absence as defense. And when that becomes clear to him, only two options remain: grow or run. But neither is your responsibility. You are not here to teach someone how to love. You are here to experience love, mutual, whole, conscious. So when you give back exactly what you receive, not more, not less, you draw a clear boundary. You say, if this is all you give, then this is all you will find here. And that response unsettles him deeply, because until then he saw you as predictable, as someone who always stays, no matter how little he shows up. But when you change, he enters a crisis, and that crisis is the best thing that can happen to him, not to satisfy you, but to make him realize that he cannot live in a relationship as if he were alone. The great turning point comes when you no longer act out of lack, but out of worth. And worth, contrary to all cliches, is not arrogance, not distance, not coldness. Worth is knowing that your devotion must not be wasted, that your time is too precious to spend it on someone who does not know what to do with it, that your heart is not soil for someone to play on who never intended to plant anything. And then you begin to save your words, not out of coolness, but because you know you have already said everything. You begin to withdraw with dignity, not because your feelings have disappeared, but because you are tired of feeling alone. You only respond when it is truly necessary. You stop offering yourself. You begin to protect yourself. And he feels this shift. He notices that you are finally taking up space, your own space. But this kind of response confuses him. He is used to women who cry, who demand, who argue. He does not know how to handle someone who simply disappears, who neither begs, nor explains, nor insists. In that moment, your silence carries the weight of a scream. When you stop reacting, he realizes he has lost something he may never have truly appreciated. It is very common for him to return at exactly this point, but not with real change, rather with the same crumbs disguised as longing. He says he thought about you, he misses you, he noticed your distance. But do not be fooled. If no clear actions follow, no real presence, no definite decision, it is only a repeat. Another test to see if you are still there. And here, your response determines everything. You can smile, be polite, be kind, but stay firm. You can listen without moving, because your response should only come if it is accompanied by truth. And in this context, truth means consistency, real presence, genuine change. If all of that is missing, your response remains the same, distance, because now you understand your actions are no longer reactive, but honest. You are not playing a game, you are being fair to yourself. For immature men, this is hard to endure, because they do not know how to handle a complete woman. They are used to women who accept little, who ask, who tolerate being almost enough. But you are not almost. You never were. It just took you a while to realize it. The moment you take your stance, he sees his own limits. And for the first time, you do not try to explain or excuse them. You simply observe, because now you know the problem was never that you were too much. The problem was that he was too small and had made himself comfortable in that. The beauty of this return is that it does not need to be aggressive. It is gentle but determined. It is quiet but unmistakable. It is calm but final. This is how you begin to experience other kinds of relationships. You make it clear you are not here to fill someone else's emotional voids. You are not available for games, for disappearances, for constant tests. You are not a side character in the life of a man who does not even know what to do with his own story. You do not need long speeches. You do not need to justify your decision. You leave with the same energy he gave you, without resentment, without shouting, without drama. Because those who scream are the ones still trying to convince. But you do not need to convince anyone that you deserve to be loved. You only need to remember it. And when that moment comes, everything changes forever. Not because you have become demanding, but because you have become conscious. Someone who lives consciously knows a little is not enough. That is not arrogance, it is clarity, it is maturity. It is the direct result of having lived through phases in which you gave too much and received almost nothing in return. You give the crumbs back because you realize your heart is not a refuge for someone who only wants to hide from the world. You give them back because you have understood your love has value. And that value will never be recognized by someone who does not yet know what they truly want from life. Because someone who lives only on the surface cannot recognize depth.